Shalom. Welcome. I'm Rabbi Scott with Beth Yeshua Messianic Synagogue here in Fort Myers, Florida. We are doing our midweek Torah study here from our home. Welcome. And we are delighted to do this with you. We started doing this around the time that COVID became a real issue this year, and we've continued it. And so we go through the Torah portion every week and talk about the Torah portion and just discuss this. If you are interested, we would recommend that you become a subscriber. That way you get notifications whenever we post a new video. Likewise, if you're local to Fort Myers, then we would welcome you to join us at our Shabbat services on Saturday at 11 a.m. You can look us up on the website, in the comments below, and so forth. We would enjoy celebrating and worshiping with you. If you have any comments or any questions or any discussion, I welcome that as well. Enjoy that. And a number of you send me your comments, and I try to respond as well as I can. And we've had some good discussions that have gone back and forth a little bit. So would encourage you to send me your emails or your questions in the comments below. Lastly, just thanks again to all of you who support this ministry, who have given to this ministry, and we just pray blessings upon you and your family for the work of your hands. Adonai has sustained us during these difficult and turbulent times and has blessed us. So we're grateful for those of you who have partnered with us in your gifts and offerings. For those of you who would like to join with us, to partner with us, to support this ministry, there is a link below. You can go to our website and you can make your donation there online, and you'll find all the information on that. It's relatively quick and convenient, as are most things in this modern age when it comes to that sort of thing. Okay, so that takes care of some of the housekeeping in particulars. Let's get started this week. We are this week going through Parshat 4, VaYera. He appeared in Bereshit, Genesis chapter 18, verse 1 through chapter 22, verse 24. This is Hebrew year 5781. And so this is the cycle. If you're looking at this video way off in the future, then that's the time and the context of when this was recorded. Okay, let's begin. We open this parsha with Adonai and the messengers having a meal with Abraham. This is the preamble, the prelude to the destruction of Sodom, the judgment upon Sodom and Sodom and Gomorrah. While on the way, there's a little stopover, a little layover, fellowship time with Abraham. They come to Abraham when he's sitting in his tent in the day, and he runs, recognizes them, and he runs, asks them to turn aside and have a meal. And so he runs to prepare a meal for them and to wash their feet. One little comment here that is kind of comment for discussion in our local community. Notice in verse 8, again we're in chapter 18 of Bereshit of Genesis. Notice in verse 8, it says he took butter, milk, and the calf which had been prepared, and he set them before them, that is the angelic or celestial beings, or the messengers, the emissaries of Adonai. It says he set them before them and stood by while they ate. There are some who would cite rabbinic instructions that would have us wait a period of time, not eating dairy and meat together, waiting a period of time in observation of the commandment in Devarim 14, Deuteronomy 14, also in Exodus, Shemot 23 and 34. The commandment says, "You shall not boil a young goat in its mother's milk." The rabbinic instructions to this would have us not allow any meat dishes to touch any dairy dishes, foods, etc., in order to refrain from accidentally or somehow having an overlap between the meat and the dairy. But notice that Abraham here is offering the celestial beings of some kind, milk, butter, and the calf together at the sitting, at least in some kind of proximity. From Micah 6, we have this: with what shall I come before Adonai? With what shall I bow myself before God on high? Shall I present him with burnt offerings and year-old calves? Will Adonai be pleased with thousands of rams, with hordes of rivers of oil? Shall I offer my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my belly for the sin of my soul? This is the prophet crying out and asking the question: How is it that we approach Adonai? What is our manner in approaching Adonai? And that would he be pleased if I were to make all these sacrifices with hordes of rivers of oil? Would he be pleased of my firstborn? Would he be pleased with the fruit of my belly? And then the answer is this: he has told you, humanity, what is good and what Adonai is seeking from you, to practice justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. What is it my daughters want from me more than anything else? What is it that my son wants above all else? What is it that my wife wants from me above all else? They want love. If I give them love but refuse to teach them, if I give them love but refuse to protect them, if I give them love but fail to provide for them, then I have failed to be thorough in my love for them. What is it that Adonai wants from us? He wants us to love him. But if we love him and fail to honor him, if we love but neglect to obey, if we love but we disappoint in obedience, if we falter in our following of him, what is my love then? Is my love my love then becomes a potion? My love becomes a drink that I become drunk upon. In a sense, we almost can become sick on our own love. My wife, for example, doesn't want me drunk with adoration. She wants me to provide, protect, and to befriend. So this idea that Adonai wants us to love him is accurate and is the greatest commandment. But that love would not be love if we failed to honor and to obey. All right, if you're following us on Shabbat, also you know everything that I'm teaching and talking about these days is also about marriage. So it's kind of where my head is. So that's why I was commenting to these things a little bit here. So Abraham brought the meat and the milk and the butter. You can discuss that as you like. Next we have the confrontation with Sodom and the emissaries from Adonai with Lot. If you want a good study, compare Adonai's hospitality with Lot's hospitality, with the hospitality of Sodom, with Sodom. Ask yourself the question, what did the mob really want? There's something they want, and they're willing to go to any violent effects in order to prosecute or in order to gain what they want. That's the real destruction here. It's easy to focus on the depravity and the wickedness, but there's more going on here than just sexual violence and depravity. So if you want to discuss that, we can discuss that further. The real reason for the destruction of Sodom and what happened there on that last night. All right, next in this portion, we come to Abimelech. We come to Sarah giving birth to Isaac, Abraham and Abimelech, the wells and the covenant between Abraham and Abimelech. And then finally we come to the Akedah, chapter 22. We read chapter 22. It's called the Akedah, which means the binding of Isaac. It is considered a formative moment in the history of pre-Synagogue, pre-kingdom history of Israel and the Jews. It is probably the most overt Messianic moment in all of Bereshit, in all of Genesis. It is looked to in Jewish tradition as the binding of the covenant, when the covenant was bound to the descendants of Abraham. And so there's much to unpack and much to dig about in this. Let's pick this apart a little bit. We're going to spend our time here in the Akedah. First question that we run into, though, the immediate question, the dilemma, is the obvious stumbling stone, the obvious hard wall of the reality of Adonai calling Abraham to sacrifice his son. Is that really what's happening here? Is it really that Abraham is being called by Adonai to come and make a sacrifice? Notice that the sacrifice called the Leolah, the Olah offering. This is the completely burned up offering. This is the offering that is completely burned up. You have to read this, and some would say that you have to read it with an open mind, and I don't know if I want to go there, because for me, the questions that I stumble over cause me to dig deeper, that causes me to understand better. And so I don't want to minimize the offense. It is offensive, this idea that Adonai would call Abraham to sacrifice his son. We have to be honest with it. It's an offensive thing. If Adonai spoke to me in a dream or a vision and said to me, "You must sacrifice your son. My son is 6 years old. He's my only son. I had him when I was 45 years old, and relatively late in life, and I'm going to be an active parent deep into my 60s." This idea that God would call upon me to make a sacrifice is perplexing and astounding. It does not make sense to me, and I need to be honest with the text firstly, and I need to say that for what it is. I am offended. I'm indignant at this idea, and I am perplexed that the Torah would say this. So that offense, if I can follow that offense up with faith and with wisdom and dig a little deeper to understand, then I begin to understand. I think what happens sometimes is some people get offended and they get blown out by the offense, and they can't reset themselves, and they can't dig into the text, and sometimes they just kind of drift away. I think in other cases, the text may be offensive, and we try to rationalize it, or somehow try to displace it or set it off to the side, or maybe we'll even just ignore it and move on. And perhaps that's a coping mechanism. But for me, again, it's the offense or the question or the perplexity that brings me to dig. All right, so let's take a look at this. Verse 6, Abraham took the wood and laid it on Isaac. Presumably, when you lay wood on someone, how do you carry a bunch of wood? You use rope to tie up a bundle of wood. This is a presumption, but it's safe. I want you to notice verse 6, Abraham took the wood, laid it on Isaac, and verse 9, he bound Isaac his son and laid him on the wood. What we see here is a chiasm. If you want to know more about chiasms, I would encourage you to watch the Lech Lecha Torah portion teaching video from last week, actually. What we have here is a chiasm. We have wood bound, presumably the wood is bound, placed on Isaac, and later we have Isaac bound and placed on the wood. So we have wood on Isaac, and later we have Isaac on wood. But in the middle there, between Isaac and Isaac references, we have verse 6, says the two of them walked on together. And then in verse 8, the two of them walked on together. Do you see this? So what we have here is a classical chiasm. And what's in between verse 6 and 8b? Between the two of them walked on together phrases. This is the pause in the narrative that we want to bring our attention to. Let me just set the phrase, let me just set it up here in the narrative. Hopefully you've read through the Akedah. If not, you may want to pause this and take a few minutes and just read chapter 22, start to finish. But here's the essence of it. What we have is we have Adonai God testing Abraham by telling him to take his son, his only son whom he loves, and take him up on the mountain and sacrifice him. And in this chapter, we have the word VaYomer occurring many times. Now, I can't remember, but I think it might be a few thousand times the word VaYomer exists in Scripture. But in any case, we have it quite a few times here in this text, and it's the basically VaYomer is and he said, or it was said. All right, so we're going to walk through this in the Hebrew, and I'll just read it for you. VaYomer Elah Abraham. In other words, God said to Abraham, VaYomer Hineni, and Abraham said, here I am. Next we have VaYomer Kana et bincha. He said, take now your only son, et bincha, et Yehidecha, your only son, whom you love, Asher Ahavta et Yitzhak, whom you love, Isaac. Whom you love, Asher Ahavta. Ahavta is love, ahava. And so Abraham says to his young men, VaYomer, and so we got another VaYomer there when he speaks to his young men. And then continuing on, now we've got the VaYomer Yitzhak el Avraham Aviv, and that is, and Isaac said to his father, my father, VaYomer Avi. And then we have VaYomer Hineni Beni, here I am, my son, Abraham answering him. VaYomer Hine Haseh Ve'ha'etzim Ve'ai Haseh Le'elah. And then we have VaYomer Avraham Elohim Yereh Lo Haseh Le'olah Beni. And that's in the Hebrew, the conversation between Isaac and Abraham. In English, Isaac spoke to Abraham as father. This is my translation. He said, "Father," and he said, "Where is? I see the fire and I see the wood. Where is the lamb?" VaYomer Hine Ha'esh. VaYomer, and Isaac said, "Here is the fire, Ha'esh." Ve'ha'etzim, here is the wood. Ve'ayeh haseh, but where is the lamb, le'olah, the offering? And then Abraham answers him, VaYomer Abraham, Elohim, God, Yereh. Now this is, Yereh is the Hebrew word, and it can mean provide or see. Elohim, provide, Lo haseh le'olah bani, will provide the lamb for himself, for himself, the burnt offering, my son, le'olah, burnt offering, beni, my son. So that's the conversation that takes place between Abraham and Isaac. And then we go on down below that, and we have the VaYomer Avraham, the angel of heaven called to him. Avraham VaYomer Hineni, Abraham says, here I am. VaYomer al tishla yadecha, do not lay a hand on the boy. El hanar. VaYomer bi nashbati ne'um Adonai. He said, by myself I have sworn, says Adonai. So what I wanted to do was call out all these VaYomers, and to show you that the midpoint of these VaYomers is indeed this conversation between Abraham and Isaac as they're walking up the mountain. They're walking up the mountain together, and we have these bookends. And going back to the chiasm, verse 6, the two of them walked on together. Verse 8b, second half of verse 8, the two of them walked on together. All right. And in the middle, we have this discussion. Isaac spoke to Abraham as father, and he said, Father. In the Hebrew, VaYomer Yitzhak, Isaac said, El Avraham Aviv, to Abraham his father. And then VaYomer, he said, Avi, father. Isaac spoke to Abraham his father. He said, Father. Why do we have all the extra words here? Why didn't it just say, Isaac called to Abraham, Father? Why do we have the extra words? What is repeated over and over in this passage? What is being repeated over and over again in this section? It is Father. Abraham was called the father of multitudes. That's what his name means. Isaac was the firstborn of the father of multitudes. And in context here, we have the beginning of this. Vayomer chana ebecha et yehidecha asher ahavta et Yitzhak. Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac. This is about a father's love. The Hebrew word here is ahavta. This is the first occurrence of the Hebrew word, ahava or ahavta. The first occurrence of this word in the Torah is here in this current section. All right. So that's the first notable thing, is that Abraham is considered a father, and we have a bunch of emphasis about the father here. But now let's look at Isaac the son. By tradition, he was 37 years old. Here is a 37-year-old man climbing up the mountain. And you have Abraham, who would be 137 years old at this point by tradition. There's a sense of profound submission here, that Isaac is submitting himself to whatever this journey is. And you have a sense of a pause, an interlude, an interruption as they're going up the mountain. Everything appears to be going according to plan. We're walking this out. Adonai is going to show us a place to go make this sacrifice. Everybody's on board. And then he lifts up his eyes and he sees the place. So he lifts up and he looks up and sees the place that he's going to make the sacrifice. And so they go on together. They walk on together, both Abraham and Isaac. And then we have this pause. And the pause is this expression of this discussion between father and son about the lamb. This is the discussion that is offered here, is the discussion of the lamb. I want to draw your attention to, using that juxtaposition, the son, the 37-year-old, submissive, obedient son, and the lamb. And we look around and ask ourselves, well, where have we heard those two things before? And if we turn to Isaiah 53, we look at this. Isaiah 53 verse 7 says this: He was oppressed, and he was afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was like a lamb led to the slaughter, like a sheep before its shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. For me, at least, this describes Isaac on the sacrifice. He was silent. He was like a lamb to the slaughter. He asked his father, where is the lamb? The answer came back, Adonai will see to the lamb. He will see the lamb. He'll provide the lamb, or he will see the establishment of the lamb. After that interlude, we don't have anything further from Isaac. And make no mistake, a 37-year-old man could at least run away from a 137-year-old man. There would have had to have been a great deal of cooperation for Isaac to have been bound. He would have had to have allowed himself to be bound. He would have had to have allowed himself to be bound. He would have had to have held his hands out or his legs out. He would have had to have sat still to be bound. All right, going back to the Vayomers, back to the chiasm and the point of it. I want to draw your attention to this kind of pivotal verse here. This Vayomer Avraham Elohim Yereh Lo Haseh Le'ola Beni. Lo means for himself. Vayomer, this is what Abraham said. Vayomer Avraham. Elohim, this is God. Yereh, will see, will provide. Lo, for himself. Haseh, the lamb. Le'ola, the burnt offering, the ola offering, the burnt offering, the complete offering. My son, Beni, my son. All right, if we're going to look at Elohim Yereh, if you want to look at this, in the passage in chapter 22. It is God will see himself or will provide for himself. In the Hebrew, if we look at this Elohim Yereh, God will see, verse 8 of Genesis chapter 22. God will provide for himself a lamb for a burnt offering, my son. That's the English. What does the Elohim and Yereh in this passage combined here remind us of? Where do we also see Elohim and Yereh, this idea of Yereh, or seeing? Look at Bereshit, Genesis chapter 1, the creation week. The first opening lines of creation. Vayomer Elohim Yehi Or Vayehi Or. God said, the Elohim, God said, let there be light, and there was light. Vayehi Or. Vayar Elohim, God saw. Vayar Elohim, the light at Haor Kitov. The light Haor, and it was good. The Yereh, see, and see it completed, to see it done. This is what is presented here. When Adonai created at the beginning, when he spoke the light into being, and he saw, and it was good. He saw it completed. He saw that it was established, and it was accomplished at his will. To see in that context, not to mention just the fact of light being required for us to see anything, but that see is to testify. That see is to acknowledge and note and testify that it's done. Verse 14. Okay, so moving on. That's from Bereshit, Genesis chapter 1. Going back to verse 14 of chapter 22. Avraham named that place Adonai Yereh, as it is said today, on the mountain Adonai will provide. In the Hebrew, Vayikra Avraham Shem Hamakom, Hahu Adonai Yereh, Asher Ve'amer Hayom, Behar Adonai Yera'eh. Vayikra Avraham Shem Hamakom. Adonai named the place. Shem Hamakom, the place. Hahu, that Adonai Yereh, God who sees. He named the place that God will see or God will provide. Ve'amer Hayom, on this day. Bahar, on the mountain. Adonai Yera'eh, Adonai will provide. Adonai will see. It shall be provided. It shall be seen. This is in verse 14. This is what Abraham is naming the place after the moment of the sacrifice, where the ram was caught in the thicket and they sacrificed the ram instead. And Abraham names this place, and he says this is the place where it shall be seen. This is a place where it shall be provided. When is the lamb of the Olah sacrifice seen upon the mountain? The ram in the thicket is not the sacrifice of the Olah offering per se, as it's prescribed. The lamb was the Olah offering that was expected and anticipated. This is why that Isaac says, "Where is the lamb?" The lamb is anticipated. The lamb is what you expect for an Olah offering. But there's no Olah here. There is the ram as a substitutionary offering, which is fine. But the question that I'm asking you is, when is the lamb of the Olah offering seen upon on the mountain? Remember the reference in Isaiah 53, which most evangelicals, or all evangelicals I expect, and Messianic believers as well, believe is prophetically pointing to Yeshua. It seems to be pretty clear and obvious. He was led as a lamb to slaughter. This is the lamb brought upon the mountain. A little note on this, a little comment, if I will, on this phrase, this Yera will be seen, it shall be seen, or is seen, or Adonai Yera, the Adonai who sees, or when how do you respond to somebody who sees? What is your response to somebody who sees, who calls you? What do you say to them? You would say, Hineni, here I am. When my son is looking for me and he says, Dad, where are you? I say, here I am. Hineni, I'm here. My son has breakfast with me most mornings. We have a few special rituals in the morning. We do this and that, and he has some rituals that he does with me every morning. We get to read the Torah together and talk and do things, and he has breakfast with me. But sometimes I have early meetings, and sometimes I'm out very early in the morning. And sometimes in the past he has called me and he says, Dad, where are you? He's asking the question, where are you? But really, what is the question that he's really asking? He's not asking, where am I? He doesn't really want to know where I am. What he really wants to know is, why aren't you here? Why are you not here? Why did you go? Where did you go, and why did you go? When my wife is expecting me home at a certain time in the evening, and if I'm late and she calls, the first words out of her mouth are, where are you? And if I were to say, I'm at the corner of McGregor and San Carlos, she might not be satisfied. No, she would say, why are you there, and why are you not here? Adonai began this inquiry in the garden. Adonai spoke to Adam and Havah, Adam and Eve, and he said, where are you? When he inquired of Abraham, this is what you say to Adonai Yireh. Here I am. Why do we say this to Adonai? Because he is Adonai Yireh, he is the one who sees. And this is what you say to the one who sees. You say, here I am. See, that binds you to the one who sees. That connects you to him. If you acknowledge that he has inquired after you, if you acknowledge and if you can see with your heart that he has asked after you, where are you? Have you seen my son? So this is what I would say. If I let me put it this way, okay. One of my daughters is working in Missouri, and imagine if I hadn't spoken with her in a long time. It had been months, and maybe we'd fallen out of contact for whatever reason. These things happen. And imagine if I'd lost contact with my daughter, hadn't spoken with her for a few months, and then I meet an acquaintance who was traveling through the town where she works, where she lives. And I say, have you seen my daughter? Did you see my daughter while you were there? She works here at this place. Did you happen to see her? Do you know her? That would be the inquiry that I would be making. Where is she? Where is she at? I would ask that question of that person because I've fallen out of contact with her. You see, that's the question that Adonai asks when he says, where are you? Adonai, the God who sees, asks the question, where are you? Because we have fallen out of contact with him. We have become separated, we've become distant, we've become lost, we've become distracted, we've become busy. The God who sees asks that question, where are you? Okay, moving on. So I want to spend a little bit of time here. For you who are Jewish and do not accept Yeshua or Jesus, as the name is, as Mashiach Umelech, Messiah and King, if you do not accept that, then I would ask you to at least consider the remarkable prophetic fulfillment in the crucifixion of Yeshua, or Jesus, as the case is, as a fulfillment of the Akedah. I know the Akedah is not a prophetic moment which must be fulfilled in the Jewish understanding. I understand that. We're not talking prophecy here per se. But if you can open your mind to the possibility of a prophetic subtext in the Akedah narrative, if you can see that, then I would ask you to take a moment and consider Jesus, consider Yeshua as a fulfillment of that subtext, of a prophetic conclusion. We understand the four classical methods of Jewish interpretation of biblical hermeneutics. The Peshat, which is the plain and simple reading of the text. The Remez, which is the allegorical and symbolical meaning of the text. The Darash, the inquiries and seeking it out, and word studies and parallels and literary devices. And then we get the Sod, the mystery, the secrets, the esoteric, the mysticals. If you're honest with the Torah, you have to acknowledge that it's not just the Peshat. The Torah is unique. The Torah is unique even in biblical literature, and is exceptional in that sense that it is that you can find satisfaction of all four of these methods of biblical understanding. So I would ask you to consider the remez of the Akedah within the milieu of Yeshua. If you're honest with the material, I think it's undeniable that Yeshua is a fulfillment of Isaac, or perhaps that Isaac is some kind of forerunner, indicator of Yeshua. Now, do you remember the conversation with Abraham and Isaac as they're on their way up the mountain? The Vayomer etzach el Avraham avi, Vayomer avi, Vayomer hineni beni, Vayomer hine haseh, ve'ha'etzim, VaYera haseh le'olah. And then Abraham's answer, Vayomer Avraham, Elohim yereh lo haseh le'olah beni. I want you to consider this from the Brit Hadashah, from the New Covenant writings, from Matthew chapter 26. Yeshua has had his Rabbi Seder with his Talmudim. Yeshua has had his Rabbi Seder with his Talmudim. And we have this. We're appear to have some problems in our video. Hopefully this is coming across okay. Okay, Yeshua has just completed his Rabbi Seder dinner with his Talmudim and instructed them. And then in Matthew 26, we come to this, verse 36. Yeshua comes with them to a place called Gethsemane. And he tells the disciples, sit here while I go over there and pray. And he took along Peter and Zebedee's two sons, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. And then he tells them, my soul is deeply grieved, even to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. Going a little farther, he fell down on his face and prayed, my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will. All right, so this is Matthew 26, verse 36 through 38. I want you to notice here where it says, going a little further, he fell face down and prayed. And he said, my Father. Do you see that? That's an outburst. It's my Father. Do you remember when Isaac is going up the mountain? And it says, and Isaac spoke to his father. He said, Avi, my Father, just as Isaac cried out. And a second time Yeshua says this, verse 42. Again, a second time he went away and prayed and said, my Father, Avi, if this cannot pass away unless I drink it, let your will be done. And then we have this, on the mountain the following day, Yeshua was crucified. And this mountain that Yeshua was crucified upon, many historians believe that it is the same mountain that Isaac was sacrificed, or nearly sacrificed on. The mountain where Isaac was bound and laid upon the wood. You see, Yeshua was given the crucifixion stake. It may likely have been a cross or a T-shaped type of gallows or it could have been a stake, a single pole. The Romans were ruthless with crucifixions. They were very expedient, and so it could have been any of these things. But he was given this. The point is, he was given this to carry, and it was found to be too great a burden after he had been beaten. But the wood was laid upon him. And it was carried, it was first laid upon him, and then somebody else was pressed into service to carry the wood up to the mountain. And then he, when they got up to the mountain, was laid upon the wood. And he was nailed. He was bound to the wood with nails. And they pierced his side, and the blood and water flowed, because he was the proper sacrifice. Because he was the proper lamb led to slaughter. And again, we have this Yeshua who had every authority that he could have called upon. Legions of angels, of angelic beings, of hosts. We call him the captain of heaven's hosts. And he could have called upon them. And he didn't. He was the lamb led to slaughter, and he was submissive the same way Isaac was submissive when he was laid upon the wood. But more than this, more than just submissive, he was a proper sacrifice. He was the proper sacrifice. See, Adam was not a sufficient lamb man sacrifice. Cain was not a sufficient sacrifice. Isaac was not a sufficient sacrifice. The Emmanuel, the son of Ahaz, who we read about in Isaiah chapter 7 and 8, who was martyred as a forerunner of Yeshua, the Emmanuel who was no more. Likewise, while he was martyred, he still wasn't the sacrifice. He wasn't the lamb that was the true Olah offering. Only the sacrifice of Yeshua, given as the Son of Adonai, twice attested to by the voice out of heaven. What was that the voice out of heaven said twice? It said, "This is my Son whom I love." Again, this is exactly what Adonai said to Abraham, "Take your son, your only son, whom you love." This is the voice out of heaven that stayed Abraham's hand. In other words, Abraham was not to sacrifice his son Isaac because Isaac was not going to be a sufficient sacrifice. Isaac was not going to be a sufficient sacrifice. In fact, Adonai will see himself, as Abraham told Isaac. As Abraham said, "On the mountain it will be seen, Bahar Adonai VaYera." This is what it means to be seen. It isn't just that he saw and observed, it was that he saw to it. It wasn't just that he saw to it that somebody did it, but he saw himself. This is what it means when it says, Adonai will see himself. And as Abraham said, Bahar Adonai VaYera. On the mountain it will be seen. The Akedah was an exhibition of love. The Akedah was a presentation of the ultimate's expression of love. Maimonides said the Akedah was meant to establish how far the fear and the love of God must go. But I would say more than that, it isn't just a yardstick. It is a testimony of, it is a billboard in the Torah of the love of God. It is where we see the love of Adonai for us. And it is where we see how we are to love him above all else. This is the VaYera. On the mountain, Adonai will see himself, the lamb for the sacrifice. And we have this word at the conclusion of the Parsha, VaYera. And what did we begin with the Parsha with? The Parsha is called VaYera. He appeared. He was seen. Again, if you don't know Yeshua in this way, if you don't know him as the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world, If you don't know him as the Melech Melchei HaMelechim, the King of Kings, if you don't know him as the Ahavat HaNefesh, the lover of your soul, if you don't know this Yeshua, then consider Yeshua in all these ways, in all these facets, in all these aspects. Consider Yeshua. And please reach out to us if you have any questions. For those of you who do know Yeshua, then I would just, again, it isn't so much that you have just accepted Yeshua for salvation, but that your salvation, Yeshua T, is seen. It isn't just, this is what it means to take up the execution stake daily. It isn't just bearing your sins again. It is seeing your salvation. When Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked up and saw the place where he was going to make the sacrifice, it isn't just the reminder of the atonement. It is that the atonement is on display, that the atonement is seen. So I encourage you with all these things. If you've got any questions or any discussion on any of this, please reach out to me. This is such a delight, and I'm just very, very grateful to do this with all of you. Again, may Adonai bless you this week. May he keep you. May his face shine upon you, and may he show his graciousness to you. The Lord lift up his countenance and give you rest, peace, shalom. Thank you, and shalom, shalom.